Good morning, Caney Springs. How you doing? All right, so here's how we're going to start off our service. We're going to have all the women come up, and we're going to determine if they're in fashion or not. How's that sound? I know some of you guys miss that big hair, don't you? It was so good. Hey, before I get started, there's a couple things I want to point out. One is, if you are a man and you walked in, you should have got one of these about our men's retreat. It's coming up. It's $120. It's in about a month. Listen. Make this a priority. For one, last time we went, we just had a blast. I mean, the rock climbing, the cabbage launching, everything. It was just an amazing time. But secondly, look, and maybe this is more for the ladies, because a lot of times guys won't go because they don't want to be a burden on their wives because they worked all week and they don't want to be a burden. They don't want to be away for the weekend. Look, your guy can go away for an entire weekend, connect with guys that will help him in his faith, and hear about Jesus. That is an amazing opportunity, and for only $120, that's great. So I'm going, Kyle's going, he's bringing his band, we're kind of the show there, so we'd love you to be a part of that. Just take this, it has all the information about how to sign up. Secondly, yesterday I went with some people, we went to Urban Life Farms, which is an inner city group that helps inner city kids by farming, and they're here today, and you can sign up. I think we mentioned that already, but we did that yesterday. It was amazing. You sign up. You know what? Probably spend a little bit more than you would typically do on produce, but think of it like this. You are investing in the lives of these kids. And so go out there. We did this with, we actually shared it with another family, so we'll be healthy 1 out of every 2 weeks, okay? So that's right out there. Just be a part of that. That's awesome. All right, well, hey, this is our last in our series, Next Gen. And because here's the deal, no matter how old you are, there's another generation following you, okay? And you have the opportunity to impact that. Doesn't matter, how old are you? 11. So there's like a 3-year-old coming up right after you. And you have the opportunity to influence these people. Now, last week we talked about leaving a generational curse, because the reality is a lot of what we got from the past, some of what we remember the most, are negative habits and what have you. But today, we're going to switch more of a positive side. We're going to see how we can leave a lasting impression, one that's good, one that's positive, one that's life-giving. Our verse is this. Here, check this out with me. This has been our goal. It says this: blessed are those who fear the Lord, who find great delight in his commands. You put God first. This is what he says about you. Their children will be mighty in the land. We have any parents here? Listen, is there anything you want more than that? That your kids will be mighty, that they'll be strong, that they'll make a difference, that they will change culture. That's what I want. It says the generation of the upright will be blessed. That next gen following us will be blessed if we follow him. I love this verse too. Here, this is right in the middle of the 10 Commandments. It says this: I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me. The reality is you can do everything right, and yet you're still probably going to hand down some of your weird habits. You know, I know my kids are happy that they got all my imperfection, that they got my hate for the Patriots. I mean, all of that, I lay it out to my kids. But keep reading. It says, but showing love to thousands of generations of those who love me. I mean, how great is that? That if you have God in your life, yeah, you might pass on some things to your grandkids, but what you'll mostly hand down is thousands of years of blessing. That's why we've been in this series, because this is what we want for our life. I read a quote this last week. Tell me if you agree with this. Most of what we leave our children and grandchildren are memories. Agree with that? I mean, there's lots of things we'll leave them, but it isn't the money. It isn't the house that they'll remember. What they will remember are those memories. It's not the car. Even if you have a really cool car, they'll probably forget the car. But it's memories. Now, this topic makes me think of my dad. Instantly makes me think of my dad. I lost my dad about 21 years ago. My son was 1 year old. He was the only one of my kids that met Grandpa. And he died on the 26th of September, which is the day before his birthday, which happens to also be my birthday. So it's been a long time. After he died, I came over and I basically ravaged his garage. and I took everything that I wanted. And every time I pick up a tool at my house, it reminds me of my dad. Every time I pick up a hammer, it's my dad's hammer, and the screwdrivers I have and the wrenches I have. If I need a file or a chisel, those are all from my dad. I have a rubber mallet. I have a sledgehammer. If you ever need it, I got a sledgehammer. I don't really use a sledgehammer, but I have it. I'm never giving it away because it's my dad's. Now, there's one tool that I have that reminds me more of my father than any, and it's right here. Okay? It's my paintbrush. Now, if you look at this paintbrush here, check this paintbrush out. How old does that look? Doesn't look all that old, does it? Yeah, about 2 weeks ago. And it's not that I don't have any paintbrushes. Paintbrushes don't last that long. I can't have a 20-year-old paintbrush. I don't have a paintbrush that my dad gave me. It's not the brush that he gave me that makes me remember him the most. You see, everything I learned about painting, I learned from my dad. When I was in college, I was 18 years old, first year of college. The first job I ever had was at a place called Bobby McGee's. Anybody remember Bobby McGee's? Woo. All right, you're hooting. I appreciate that. You know what? It was a fun place to work, and it kind of seemed to fit. Oh, you know what? It's going to help. Sorry. Yeah. Cheaters. Going to need some cheaters here. But I didn't like that I worked nights. And I did a lot of youth ministry stuff, and I was trying to figure out a way to not work as many nights. And so my dad said, hey, why don't you come work for me? And my dad was a house painter at the time. He had sold his business, and he started painting houses. And so I do not know what I was thinking. But I said, okay, Dad, that sounds like a great idea. I'll come work for you. You're a recovering alcoholic. We don't get along. That sounds perfect. So I started working for Hawkins Quality Painting. Within really a very short time, I was second in command at Hawkins Quality Painting. You know how many people worked for Hawkins Quality Painting? Yeah, 2. And I was clearly second. And it was, and everything I learned about painting, I learned from my dad. He taught me everything. He taught me that there's nothing more beautiful than a canvas drop cloth like the one I have underneath me. He also taught me that if you're going to paint, before you ever put a brush to paint, dip it in water because then it'll clean up a lot easier. Another thing my dad taught me is that when you paint, you never, ever, ever let anybody use your good brush. And this came into play when I got married. We got this set of furniture, and my wife wanted me to paint it, and I was too lazy. So I said, no, I'm not going to paint it. She says, you know what, I'm tired of waiting for you to paint it. I'm going to paint it. I said, great. She said, well, why don't you teach me? I said, no problem, I'll teach you. And so I taught her, so some basics and all the things I just taught you. And then I said to her, but you can't use my brush. You can't use my good brush. And she laughed, that's so funny. And I said, no, babe, I am totally serious. You are not using my new brush. So what my wife did is she went to the paint store. I think she went to Depot. Should have gone to Dixieland. But she went and found a brush. And it was just like this one right here, this paintbrush, just like this, because this is my favorite brush. This is what I use to do rooms and what have you. And she took it, and she opened it up, she got a Sharpie, and she wrote all over it, Jelane's brush, do not touch. Don't touch Jelane's brush. No one can touch Jelane's brush. So she painted the furniture. A week later, I went out, found her brush. Guess what? Stiff as a board. Totally unusable. Now, I love, anybody hate painting a house? Anybody hate painting? You guys hate painting? There's something about it, everything about it, I just love. I love, the smell of a paint store. It's weird, that sounds weird, doesn't it? Reminds me of my dad. I love picking out a new brush. I love locking myself in a room and putting on some good jazz and not leaving until it looks fantastic. It's pretty boring, isn't it? The second half is going to be worse because we're going to watch the paint dry. Everything I learned about painting, I learned from my dad, because my dad was a great painter. I am an okay painter, but my dad did more than just paint houses. He actually painted other things too. He went to the USC school of art because he couldn't get into UCLA. This is the only painting that I have of my dad's, and keep it here. Here's a legend in the Hawkins family that we'll never let anybody ever forget. That when he was at paint school at USC, that he was approached by Walt Disney to paint backgrounds for his cartoons. And my dad says, "I will never do that because a true artist doesn't paint cartoons." Let me read you another quote. It says this: "Carve your name on hearts, not tombstones. A legacy is etched into the minds of others and the stories they share about you." Wouldn't you like that to be your legacy? And it's not money, or it's not a position that you held. It's not the car that you drove or how fancy your house looked. But in the people around you, whether it's your children or your friends or the people that work with you, that carved and etched in their hearts are stories of who you are and what you did and what you taught them. What do you think that L stands for? Legacy. Love is good, though. That was good. You get credit. I'll give you credit for that. Somebody should have said Lord, like, because the answer is always Jesus, no matter whatever the question is in church. What would you like your legacy to be? I think we can decide on that ourselves. So here's how I'd like to start. I want you to bow your head. And maybe just pray this simple prayer. Say, "God, I want to leave a legacy. Show me how to do that." Lord God, I pray that you would take us in these moments and that we would just hear from you. We'd listen to what you have to say. Some great people in here. God, I pray that we would focus on you so that the legacy that we leave is strong. Points people to who you are. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, the first step, if we're going to decide on a legacy, is to figure out just exactly what we want that to be. And I cannot decide that for you. I have written down some ideas because these are what, as I'm talking to people, a lot of people want. Some people want to be remembered for a strong work ethic, that they worked hard. Some people want to be remembered as a good dad or a good mom. Some people want to be remembered as somebody who made a difference in the world, so that when you worked, you had purpose in your life. Some want to be remembered as somebody who had strong relationships. Some want to be remembered for bringing out the best in the people around them. There are lots of different legacies. We're going to look at some ways to leave a legacy. We're going to do this by looking at Ephesians 4. We actually looked at this last week, but we want to kind of explore it a little bit more. So if you have your Bible, open up to Ephesians 4. If not, I'll just read it to you. Just want to challenge you to bring your Bible that way. And I would bring a paper Bible if you can, because then you can write on it and highlight it, and it's always there for you. But if you want to use a tablet, that's fine. So Ephesians chapter 4 gives us some ways to leave a legacy. And like I said, I can't tell you how to leave a legacy, but if any of the legacies that I just read to you resonate with you, Ephesians 4 will help you get there. All right? So this is how it starts. Ephesians 4, we're starting in verse 22. It starts like this: "You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in the true righteousness and holiness." We talked about this last week. Taking off your hand-me-downs, Because you got hand-me-downs. You got hand-me-downs from your parents. You got hand-me-downs from your grandparents. This attitude, that bad attitude, this, quality that you had, you got. And God says, those bad ones, take those off and put those on. Actually, that's what I did this morning. I went into my giveaway box because I didn't want to get paint on this. I didn't want to get Tiffany blue, which was my daughter's, color of my daughter's room. I want to get that on my shirt. And I chose a shirt that even if I did, you probably wouldn't know. But to take off the old, to put on the new, we do it in fashion. God says to do it in our life. Now, look at verse 25. Here's something to put on. We take this off. Here's one thing to put on. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we're all members of one body. If we're going to leave a legacy, we have to be truth tellers. We can't lie to each other. And I'm going to expand this idea a little bit to, instead of just, a line that you might say where you lie to somebody, I want to make it bigger. And that is, number one, leave a legacy of authenticity. You see, it's not just about, lying to people. It's about having your words match your lifestyle. This is what we need to be about. Now, this word authenticity, you hear it around very much? It is a buzzword in our culture because everybody wants it. And yet the more and more we seek for it, the less we seem to find it. We put things into our life that sabotage us. Let me give you one. Social media is one. Because when you look on social media, authenticity says, I am a real person. I have good and I have bad. But when I see your Facebook posts, you just have great vacations. And I'm not seeing the pipe burst. I'm just seeing all the awesome things. Everybody puts about how fantastic their relationships are. Have you guys been following my wife and I? We're on this deal where we're going on 52 hikes in 52 weeks. That makes us seem like very good athletic people. We don't ever tell you the bad. That's what social media is. Everybody says I'm in a good, strong relationship. They never say, yeah, I'm lonely and I'm pining for my ex. That's not a Facebook post. Instagram is no different. You take a picture of your lunch at the new brunch place, right? You don't take a picture of the French bread pizza you just microwaved. Do you? Honestly, the only person that does is Kyle. When he's sick, he takes a selfie of how horrible he looks. He's the only person I know that does that. You know what I'm talking about? It's awesome. Look, authenticity means that our insides and our outsides match. The words that we say, the challenges that we make to kids and people around us match what we actually do. A couple of words would be character, integrity, consistency. An authentic person is honest about their mistakes. An authentic person doesn't just tell the good stories to make them look good. They tell the dark side as well. An authentic person is willing to admit that they aren't perfect. An authentic person doesn't say, do as I say. They say, do as I do. Follow me as I do this. This is how we leave a legacy. And think about it. This is the kind of people that we're drawn to. Later today, we're going to watch a football game, right? And we're going to cheer for people that are great athletic people. Who was Carolina? Okay. Who was Broncos? Okay, looks like we got a Bronco fan. Listen, I personally get a hoot out of Cam Newton. He's great. In fact, after this sermon, if I nail it, I'm dabbing. We look up to people on a football field like that, but the people in our lives that we are drawn to are real. They're not arrogant. They're authentic. This is, I find, remarkable. We always like to show everybody only the good side of us, but the reality is we are drawn to people that show the weakness about themselves. That's authentic. That's how we leave a legacy. Parents, be willing to share with your kids about the mistakes you made. Kids, be willing to say to your parents, I need your help. Don't just say, I got this. Let's be real with each other. You know where the word authentic comes from? You know where that comes from? It actually is a painting term. And it's to determine whether or not a painting is the original. And so if you find a Rembrandt, you have to have it authenticated to see if the brush strokes match and the signature matches. In this painting right here, if you look down at the bottom in red letters, it's a Hawkins. Now, listen, if you are a true person, an honest person, an authentic person, you carry about you the signature of God because that's what he values. That leaves a legacy. Okay, let me give you another way to leave a legacy. If we keep reading, it says this: in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Now think about this for a moment. How many of the ugly memories we have of the past happened in a moment like this? A moment of anger. A moment when words came out. And God challenges to something bigger. Okay, I read a quote this last week. Tell me if you agree with this. Speak when you are angry, and you will make the best speech you will ever regret. So here's what I think we need to do in our relationships to create legacy, and that is leave a legacy of conflict resolution. You're not going to find anything more brilliant about conflict resolution than what you will read in these verses. There are two comments that God makes that challenges us to, you'll never learn better. And the first one, he says this. It doesn't say don't be angry. You notice that? It doesn't say don't be angry. You can't help it. It says in your anger, do not sin. Because anger happens. You drop a hammer on your toe, anger. You get pulled over by a cop. Anger. You get cut off on the freeway. Anger. You hit your head on a cabinet. Anger. It just comes. One of the things my dad taught me about painting was if you're up on top of a ladder, you don't take up a full bucket of paint. You take just a little bit of paint. And then you go up and you make, you touch it up, you come back down. Well, I was working and there was just a small part that I missed, so I put the ladder over there and I didn't want to pour out the paint, I didn't want to do that whole thing. So I went and I put the paint bucket on the roof and I started painting and I hit it and it fell down literally on my head. And I am covered in any color. Any guesses what color? Blue. I look like a Smurf. Let me tell you something. You dump a bucket of paint on your head, anger. You see your son running around covered in blue paint, anger. You cannot stop that. Now, let me read you a quote. This is from a book called Crucial Conversations. You tell me if you agree with this. It says, others don't make you mad, you make you mad. You make you scared, annoyed, or insulted. You and you alone create the situation. Once you've created your upset emotions, you have only two options. You can act on them or be acted on by them. That is, when it comes to strong emotions, you either find a way to master them or you fall hostage to them. The reality is, anger will happen, so what do you do about it? Well, in this verse it says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. More wise words were never spoken. When we get upset, we have two responses. We either want to fight and words come out, or we want to run and hide. And you go back, you guys know, some of you live this in your marriage. There's a problem, so you just separate. You don't talk about it. You become passive aggressive. Listen, God says every day, work it out that day. Because when you don't, it doesn't go away. It just creates another brick between you and that person. Now, I want to keep reading because the second point and the third point are really connected. Look at verse 29. It says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. God, verse 31, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. Take that off. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. So much of the hurt legacy comes from angry words, doesn't it? So here's the challenge. Leave a legacy of encouraging communication. Or you're encouraging people. You're lifting them up. You're letting them know what you value about them. I'm guessing some words are going to come out that aren't good, but if it is our habit to encourage people, this is what creates legacy in our life. Now, I hate to admit this, but the most profound thing that was said during this whole series was said by my father-in-law. Did anybody hear my father-in-law when he was here? Okay, how many of you loved my father-in-law? All right? Yeah, stop telling me. All right? I know you loved him. He was fantastic. It's so funny, the comments I'd get about him. Oh, your father-in-law was so great. Your father was so wise. Your father-in-law, when he said something, I was writing everything down. You know, I'm right here. One comment was my favorite, though. He says, oh, your father-in-law was so great. He's so adorable. I'm pretty sure those words were never said about me after a message. Listen, I know you love him. I love him. And when these are the words that he said that I think are the most profound of this whole deal. When it comes to other generation, seek affirmation, not toleration. You see, we think we're doing good when we tolerate each other. I'm going to tolerate your music. I'm going to tolerate your advice. And what develops relationships is when we can affirm, when we can encourage, when we can applaud the good in the people that are coming behind us and the people that went before us. That leaves a legacy. Dad, take a moment to tell your kid all the things that you like about them. Sometimes they don't want to listen, so this, you know what I do? I email them. Because you know, when you start talking, it's like, oh, Dad, you know, whatever. Well, they got to finish the email or the text. Email them. Kids, when you appreciate something your parents did, just take a moment, and you don't have to send an email, but just say thank you. Thank you for paying for my college. Thank you for driving me everywhere. Thank you for signing me up for dance. Thank you. Because that creates legacy. Now, here's the ironic part of this whole message. I started off talking about my father. But I have to tell you, for the first 13 years of my life, my dad did everything exactly the opposite. You know, we talk about being honest with each other. Well, my dad was an alcoholic. Do you know how to tell if an alcoholic is lying? Have you ever heard this? You know how to tell an alcoholic is lying? What? Their lips are moving. And so many broken promises and so many things I said that they would do that they won't do. Words and lifestyle do not match for a person like that. Anger. Oh my gosh. So many memories of anger. I remember my mom wearing sunglasses for a week. I remember my dad taking a full cup of hot coffee and throwing it across the kitchen. And as far as words go, the encouraging ones don't typically come in 4 letters. But I remember all those. So I really have one more point, and if you don't get anything out of this message, then get this point. Okay? Doesn't matter what your background is or what you did in the past or who you hurt. Jesus can rewrite your legacy. He can write you a new one. So I was about 12 years old, and my sister had come home. I don't know, she'd gone to a concert or she went to church. Anyway, she came home sharing about this Jesus to my dad. And my dad gave his life to Christ. He gave up smoking instantly. It didn't even have a desire for it ever again. If any of you struggle with trying to give up smoking, that's impossible. And yet that happened. Now, it wasn't for another couple of years that my dad gave up drinking. And it's a whole other story. But he became dry when I was about 13 years old. And slowly, over time, God started to change my dad's life. What I remember most about that point, besides the painting and listening to Bible radio, he listened to J. Vernon McGee every day, Bible radio. I was so happy when I was on the other side of the house, to be honest. My dad loved to study God's Word. Every commentary I ever had was from my dad. I used to have my rafters full of them. You don't need them anymore because I can just Google search it and I can find all those same answers, and all the commentaries are online, so most of those I've given away. But everything I have in my office is from my dad because he wanted to be a pastor. He wanted to study so he could be a pastor. You know, one small little issue with that, he didn't like people. So... You know, if it could have been a congregation just of dogs, he would have been great. So he never really became, you know, he did a couple Bible studies, but he never really became a pastor. But he passed on that legacy to his son. Before I came here, my dad never saw Canyon Springs. I wish he had. He would have loved this place. But before here, I was working at a camp. It's called Forest Home. Forest Home is this big camp. There's about 1,500 people every week during summer at Forest Home. And weekends, they have all these different retreats. Before I came, they had the leader of the camp. He used to speak all the time. And he left, and they had a new guy, and he didn't like to speak at all. And so they needed somebody to speak on Sundays when the speaker left, because a lot of times they'd get pastors, and they'd have to be back in their congregation for Sunday. And so I got the nod every time. Family camps and parent-child camps and, you know, fall family, and military, all of that. I spoke on Sunday mornings over and over and over again. Loved it. So much fun. And I remember one day I decided to invite my dad. And they drove up, and I remember speaking, and I'm looking out, and there's my wife. Front row, my wife, my mom, and my dad. And as I'm speaking, tears are just flowing down his face. In that moment, legacy realized. Listen, I do not know what your history is. I don't know what your past is. I don't know if you have adult children who don't like you. I don't know if you've made some mistakes that you feel like you could never change. I don't know if you drank or you used weed. I don't know anything about your life. But if you're thinking about yourself going, I can never change my legacy, I have living proof. I am living proof that you can change your legacy. And it is my heart's desire that I'm so excited that someday I'm going to see my dad and wrap my arms around him. Tell him about you guys. So here's how I want to end. I want you to just bow your head. And I have to say this. If you want to know this God that can change your legacy, it begins so simply. I mean, it's a hard lifestyle to live, but that first step to say, God, I'm putting you into control of my life, you can do that. And we celebrated communion today. Jesus came down to earth. He died on the cross. That paid the penalty for your sin. So you wouldn't have to pay it. And you just say, God, come into my life. Forgive me of my sin. I give my life to you. And if you pray that, God comes into your life and he changes you. And he wipes out your past and he makes you new. If you want to do that today, it's so simple. Just pray this. Say, God, come into my life. God, forgive me of my sin. God, thank you for sending your son to die for my sin. I give my life to you. Now, if you prayed that prayer, I would love to know about it. If you want to take those white cards and just write, I made a decision for Christ, or if you want to go out to our information table, we can get you information on that. Or you just call me or email me. Love to know about it. Now, for the rest of you who've already made that decision, I just want to pray simply this. God, with this group of people, I pray that you would help them to leave a legacy. That their legacy would be real. That their legacy would be kind. That their words would be encouraging. That you would make a difference in the lives of these people. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here.